The humid, heavy air of a late April evening in 1973 settled over the small town of Enfield, Illinois, like a damp, suffocating blanket. It was a town like many others stitched into the fabric of the rural Midwest. Quiet, predictable, and stubbornly ordinary. Life moved at the pace of the seasons. Lawns were neatly trimmed, neighbors exchanged pleasantries over weathered fence posts, and the most exciting event of the week was usually the Friday night high school baseball game. For Henry McDaniel, a man whose life was as deeply rooted in Enfield's soil as the old oaks, it was just another night, indistinguishable from thousands that had come before. He was relaxing in his armchair, the glow of the television flickering across his face, when a sound from outside pricked his attention, a faint rhythmic scratching against the siding of his house. He muted the television, listening. It wasn't the familiar skittering of a raccoon or the brush of a tree branch. This was a persistent, deliberate sound, a scraping. Annoyance mingled with curiosity. Heaving himself up, he grabbed a heavy-duty flashlight from the kitchen drawer and opened his front door, peering into the inky blackness of his yard. The scratching stopped instantly. He swept the powerful beam of light across the familiar landscape of his property, the ancient oak tree whose branches clawed at the night sky, the weathered garden shed, the patchy lawn still damp with evening dew. Nothing seemed out of place. But as he was about to dismiss it and turn back inside, a flicker of movement near the gleaming steel of the railroad tracks that ran behind his house caught his eye. He swung the flashlight back, its beam cutting a sharp, trembling circle in the dark. And then he saw it. His mind stuttered, trying to process the impossible image before him. It wasn't an animal he recognized from any book or any tale. It wasn't a dog, or a coyote, or anything that belonged in the woods of southern Illinois. The creature stood frozen in the cone of light, a grotesque silhouette that seemed pulled from a fever dream. It was a sickly grayish color, with a disproportionately short, thick body balanced precariously on 3 spindly legs. 2 small, almost useless-looking arms were held close to its torso, ending in what looked like tiny clawed hands. But its eyes were the worst part. They were enormous, perfectly round, and glowed with a sickening internal pinkish-red hue in the flashlight's beam, like 2 smoldering coals. They were, as McDaniel would later tell anyone who would listen with a shudder, as big as flashlights. For a moment that stretched into an eternity, man and creature simply stared at each other across the 20 feet of dark lawn. A primal fear, cold and sharp, seized McDaniel, bypassing all rational thought. This was not a creature of God's green earth. He fumbled for the doorknob, his hand shaking so badly it took 2 tries, and slammed the heavy oak door shut, ramming the deadbolt home. His heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. He scrambled to a window, peering through the curtains, but the thing was gone. The only sound was the familiar chirp of crickets, an ordinary chorus that seemed to mock the impossible thing that had just stood in his yard. Shaken, his breath coming in ragged gasps, Henry McDaniel called the White County Sheriff's Department. When the officers arrived, they found him rattled but resolute, the initial shock giving way to a grim certainty. He recounted his story with the unflinching conviction of a man who knew what he saw, no matter how unbelievable it sounded. Outside, in the damp night air, they found physical evidence that sent a fresh chill down their spines. There were deep gouge-like scratches on the aluminum screen of the McDaniels' front door, as if something had been trying to claw its way in. And in the soft, muddy dirt near the house, they discovered a series of bizarre footprints. They were shaped somewhat like a dog's, but with one disturbing, unnatural anomaly. Each print clearly and distinctly showed 6 toes, ending in sharp claws that had dug deep into the soil. Word traveled with the speed of gossip in a town like Enfield. The story of McDaniel's monster was on everyone's lips by morning, whispered over coffee at the diner and debated in the aisles of the general store. Some scoffed, attributing the sighting to a late night, a trick of the light, and an overactive imagination. Others, the older folks who knew the deep woods and the strange things they could hold, weren't so sure. The scratches and the 6-toed prints were undeniable facts, hard to explain away. A few nights later, the tension simmering in the town boiled over. A group of local men, fueled by a mixture of fear and bravado, formed an impromptu search party. They were armed with shotguns and a thirst for answers. They were led by Rick Rainbow, a radio news director from the neighboring town of Carmi, who had heard the reports and arrived with a tape recorder, sensing a story. As they cautiously made their way through the tangled woods near the McDaniel property, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and suspense, one of the men let out a sharp yell. There it was, crouched in the undergrowth not 50 yards away. The creature let out a horrifying, high-pitched hiss that sounded uncannily like a breaking train, a shriek that cut through the night. In a surge of panic, one of the men raised his rifle and fired. He was certain he hit it. He heard the thing cry out, a sound that was disturbingly not animal-like, and saw it bound away with an unnatural, explosive speed, covering 75 feet in what seemed like 3 giant, impossible leaps, before vanishing once more into the impenetrable darkness. The woods fell silent again. A frantic search of the area revealed no body and no blood, only the same strange, 6-toed tracks pressed into the mud. Now, the story exploded. What had been a local curiosity became a national phenomenon. Reporters and paranormal investigators from across the region descended on Enfield, turning the quiet town into a media circus. Henry McDaniel found himself an unwilling celebrity, sitting on his porch and repeating his story to a parade of journalists who eyed him with a mixture of fascination and skepticism. He never wavered. His description of the creature remained hauntingly consistent down to the last, terrifying detail. It had 3 legs on it, a short body, 2 little short arms, and 2 pink eyes as big as flashlights, he told the Mount Vernon Register-News, his voice firm. He had become convinced of its otherworldly nature. If they do find it, he said, his gaze distant, fixed on the woods beyond his yard. They will find more than one, and they won't be from this planet, I can tell you that. The sightings continued sporadically for a few more days, always fleeting, always strange. A child claimed to see it peering from behind the schoolyard fence. A farmer reported it darting across a dirt road in his headlights. Then, as suddenly and inexplicably as it had arrived, the Enfield Monster vanished. The media packed their cameras and notebooks and moved on to the next strange tale. The search parties disbanded, and an uneasy quiet, heavier than before, returned to the town. But things were never quite the same. The scratches on McDaniel's door remained a testament to the night his ordinary world was breached by the impossible. The memory of those glowing pink eyes lingered in the collective consciousness of the community, a story to be told in hushed tones to wide-eyed children for generations to come. To this day, no rational explanation has ever been found. No known animal matches the description. No hoax was ever confessed. The creature of Enfield, Illinois, simply scurried into local legend, a bizarre and chilling footnote in the town's history. A 3-legged, 6-toed mystery that emerged from the darkness and, just as quickly, was swallowed by it again.